Archangel Michael says, God sent this 3 times, and you missed it every time. Today, it is being sent a 4th time, and this time, it is asking you to finally stop and listen. Do not close this video. Do not scroll past it the way you scrolled past the last 3 attempts to reach you. Something inside you already senses that this is not the first time this particular message has tried to find its way to you. That sense is correct. This is not new information arriving for the first time. This is a message returning, again, because it was never fully received the times before. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. Whatever was occupying your mind before this moment, set it aside completely, because this message deserves your full attention this time, not the partial, distracted attention it received the last 3 times it tried to reach you. Consider, honestly, what your typical response looks like when something important tries to reach you through a quiet inner nudge. Do you tend to notice it fully, sit with it, and consider its implications, or does your attention typically move past it quickly, absorbed back into the next task, the next distraction, the next demand on your time? Most people, without realizing it, have developed automatic patterns of moving past these quiet signals, patterns so ingrained that noticing them requires a deliberate pause, exactly like the pause this message is asking you to take right now. Think back over the last several months of your life. Somewhere in that stretch of time, there were quiet moments when a thought arrived clearly, when a feeling rose up strongly, when a circumstance repeated itself in a way that felt too specific to be coincidence. You noticed these moments, briefly, and then you moved on, back into the busyness of ordinary life, telling yourself you would think about it later. Later never came. This message is what later looks like, finally arriving, whether you were fully ready for it or not. The first time this message tried to reach you, it likely arrived gently, almost too gently to notice. A quiet unease about a decision you were making. A subtle sense that something in your life was not quite aligned with what you actually wanted. A small moment of clarity that surfaced and then quickly faded beneath the pressure of everything else demanding your attention that day. You felt it, briefly, and then you let it go, assuming it was nothing important, assuming it would either resolve itself or simply fade away entirely if left unaddressed. It did not fade away. It simply grew quieter for a while, waiting for another opportunity to reach you. The second time this message tried to reach you, it likely arrived with a bit more insistence, perhaps through a conversation that unexpectedly touched on exactly the issue you had been avoiding, or through a piece of writing, a video, a passing comment from someone that mirrored, almost exactly, the same truth you had already brushed aside once before. This time, you may have paused a little longer, felt a slightly stronger reaction, perhaps even considered, briefly, that something needed to change. But life continued moving quickly, and the moment of consideration passed without producing any actual action. It did not disappear after that second attempt either. It simply waited again, patiently, for a third opportunity. The third time this message tried to reach you, it likely arrived through something more difficult to ignore. A physical symptom that would not fully resolve. A relationship difficulty that kept resurfacing despite your best efforts to manage it quietly. A financial pattern that repeated itself again, despite promises you made to yourself the last time it happened. This third attempt likely felt more uncomfortable, harder to dismiss entirely, and yet, somehow, you still found a way to explain it away, to attribute it to bad luck, external circumstances, timing, anything other than the deeper truth this message was actually trying to deliver. Now it is here a fourth time, and this time, the tone is different. Not because anger has replaced patience, but because patience alone was clearly not enough to finally get through to you. Sometimes the most loving thing a message can do is stop being gentle enough to be easily ignored, and instead become direct enough to finally land. Here is what you have been missing, repeatedly, across all 3 previous attempts to reach you. You have been treating your own inner discomfort as an inconvenience to manage, rather than as information to be understood. Every time something in you flagged discomfort, unease, or resistance, you found a way to quiet it quickly, to move past it efficiently, to keep functioning without actually addressing what that discomfort was pointing toward. This pattern has served you in the short term, allowing you to keep moving forward without disruption, but it has cost you significantly in the long term, allowing important truths to accumulate, unaddressed, beneath the surface of your daily functioning. Consider, honestly, how many times in the past year alone you have felt a genuine, unmistakable inner signal that something needed attention, and how many of those times you actually stopped to address it, compared to how many times you simply pushed through, distracted yourself, or told yourself you would deal with it eventually. If the number of times you pushed through significantly outweighs the number of times you actually addressed the signal, this pattern has likely become deeply ingrained, operating almost automatically now, without much conscious awareness on your part. This is precisely why the message needed to return 3 times before finally reaching a volume loud enough to actually break through. Each time you dismissed it, the pattern of dismissal reinforced itself, making the next dismissal even easier and more automatic than the one before. Breaking this cycle requires conscious, deliberate effort, because the automatic pattern of dismissal will not simply correct itself without your active participation. There is a relationship in your life, and you already know exactly which one, that has been quietly costing you more than it gives, for longer than you have been willing to fully acknowledge. The first time this truth tried to reach you, it likely arrived as a brief moment of exhaustion after spending time with this person, quickly explained away as simply having had a long day. The second time, it likely arrived as a repeated pattern of feeling unheard or unseen during your interactions with them, again explained away as simply how that person communicates, nothing personal. The third time, it likely arrived as a specific incident that left you feeling genuinely hurt or disrespected, an incident you again minimized, telling yourself it was not that serious, that you were perhaps overreacting. This message is not asking you to end this relationship abruptly today. It is asking you to finally stop minimizing what you have already noticed 3 separate times. Whatever pattern exists in this relationship, whatever cost it has been quietly extracting from you, deserves honest acknowledgement now, rather than continued dismissal disguised as patience or loyalty. There is also a version of yourself, a fuller, more expressed version, that has been trying to emerge for quite some time now, and that has also been met with dismissal on at least 3 separate occasions. The first time this fuller version tried to emerge, perhaps through a bold idea you almost acted on, or a truth you almost spoke aloud, you likely retreated quickly back into familiar smallness, telling yourself it was not the right time, not the right audience, not worth the risk involved. The second time, perhaps through an opportunity that appeared and then quietly passed you by while you deliberated too long about whether you were truly ready. The third time, perhaps through a specific moment when someone else recognized potential in you that you were not yet willing to fully claim for yourself. This fuller version of you has not given up trying to emerge, despite being dismissed 3 times already. It is here again today, through this message, asking you, one more time, whether you are finally ready to stop retreating into familiar smallness and instead allow yourself to become who you actually are underneath all the caution and self-protection you have accumulated over the years. Consider, too, a specific area of your health that has been quietly asking for your attention across these same 3 attempts to reach you. Perhaps a symptom that comes and goes without clear explanation. Perhaps an energy level that has been steadily declining without any single dramatic cause you can point to directly. Perhaps a sleep pattern that has been disrupted for longer than feels normal, explained away repeatedly as simply stress, simply a busy season, simply something that will resolve on its own eventually. The body rarely lies, even when the mind finds endless ways to explain away what the body is trying to communicate. If this same health signal has appeared repeatedly, across multiple separate occasions, without ever being fully addressed, it deserves genuine attention now, whether that attention looks like finally scheduling an appointment you have been postponing, finally changing a habit you know is contributing to the problem, or finally allowing yourself the rest your body has been requesting through increasingly persistent signals. There is also a specific financial pattern that has likely repeated itself across these same 3 attempts, a cycle of overspending followed by regret, or avoidance followed by mounting anxiety, or a specific decision you keep almost making and then backing away from at the last moment. Each time this pattern repeated, you likely told yourself this time would be different, this time you would finally address it properly, only to find yourself, weeks or months later, back in the same familiar cycle once again. Patterns that repeat 3 times are rarely coincidental. They are evidence of something deeper that has not yet been fully addressed, something that will likely continue repeating indefinitely until the underlying cause, rather than simply the surface symptom, finally receives honest attention. Think, too, about a specific dream or goal that has surfaced repeatedly in your thoughts, across multiple separate occasions, each time dismissed as impractical, unrealistic, or simply not the right time to pursue. The first time this dream surfaced, perhaps years ago now, you likely had reasonable-sounding explanations for why it was not yet the right moment. The second time, perhaps more recently, the explanations may have shifted slightly, but the underlying dismissal remained the same. The third time, perhaps very recently, the same dream returned once more, this time perhaps accompanied by a stronger sense of urgency, a quiet recognition that time continues passing regardless of how many times you postpone actually pursuing what you want. This message, arriving now for what functions as a 4th attempt, is not asking you to abandon caution entirely or make reckless decisions without any planning. It is asking you to finally take this recurring dream seriously enough to begin planning toward it deliberately, rather than continuing to dismiss it as something for an indefinite future that may never actually arrive if the pattern of postponement continues unaddressed. Consider, as well, a specific piece of guidance or advice that someone offered you, perhaps more than once, from more than one source, guidance that you heard, acknowledged politely, and then quietly set aside without actually implementing. When the same essential advice arrives from multiple, unrelated sources, this is rarely coincidental. It often indicates something genuinely important that deserves more serious consideration than a polite nod followed by continued inaction. Think honestly about whether there is a piece of advice like this in your recent memory, something you have heard more than once, from more than one person, perhaps phrased differently each time but pointing toward the same essential truth. If such advice exists in your recent memory, this message is asking you to finally take it seriously, rather than continuing to treat it as simply one more opinion among many, easily set aside without consequence. There is also likely a specific fear that has quietly controlled more of your decisions than you have been willing to fully acknowledge, a fear that has appeared repeatedly across different situations, each time disguised as practical caution rather than named honestly as fear itself. The first time this fear influenced a decision, you likely did not fully recognize it as fear, calling it instead prudence, responsibility, or realistic thinking. The second time, perhaps you began to notice the pattern more clearly, though you still proceeded to let the fear guide your choice regardless. The third time, the pattern likely became difficult to ignore entirely, though you still found a way to justify following the fear's guidance one more time. This message is asking you to finally name this fear honestly, rather than continuing to disguise it as something more acceptable sounding. Once named clearly, fear tends to lose some of its automatic authority over your decisions, allowing you the possibility of choosing differently, even while the fear itself remains present. Consider, too, a specific boundary that you have needed to set with someone in your life, a boundary that has become necessary across at least 3 separate incidents, each time avoided because setting the boundary felt too uncomfortable, too likely to create conflict, too risky compared to simply tolerating the situation one more time. Boundaries that get postponed repeatedly do not tend to resolve themselves. They tend to accumulate, quietly, into resentment that eventually either explodes disproportionately or hardens into permanent emotional distance, neither outcome being as healthy as simply addressing the boundary directly, calmly, the first time it became necessary. If there is a boundary you have been postponing across multiple incidents, this message is asking you to finally set it, not necessarily today, not necessarily perfectly, but soon, deliberately, before the accumulated resentment causes more damage than the initial discomfort of setting the boundary ever would have caused. Think, finally, about a specific moment of spiritual or emotional longing that has surfaced repeatedly, a sense that something beyond your current daily routine has been asking for your attention, a longing for deeper meaning, deeper connection, deeper alignment between your outer life and your inner truth. This longing likely does not arrive loudly or dramatically. It arrives quietly, in unguarded moments, easily dismissed as impractical or simply not urgent compared to the more immediate demands of daily life. If this longing has surfaced repeatedly, across multiple quiet moments over recent months, it deserves your honest attention now, rather than continued postponement in favor of more immediately pressing but ultimately less important daily concerns. Consider, as well, a specific way you have been speaking to yourself internally, a critical, harsh inner voice that has grown louder across the same 3 attempts to reach you with a gentler alternative. The first time a gentler, more compassionate way of relating to yourself tried to emerge, perhaps through a moment of genuine self-kindness after a mistake, it likely felt unfamiliar, even slightly uncomfortable, and you quickly returned to the more familiar harshness instead. The second time, perhaps through someone else modeling self-compassion in a way that struck you as worth considering, you noticed the contrast between their approach and your own, and then let the observation fade without actually changing your own internal pattern. The third time, perhaps through a moment of genuine exhaustion from the constant harshness, you may have briefly wondered whether a different approach might serve you better, before returning once again to the familiar critical voice out of habit. This message is asking you to finally consider, seriously, whether the harsh inner voice you have been defaulting to has actually served you well, or whether it has simply been familiar, mistaken for necessary simply because it has been present for so long. A gentler inner voice does not mean lowering your standards or excusing genuine mistakes. It means holding yourself accountable with the same patience and understanding you would naturally extend to someone else you cared about, rather than a harshness you would likely never direct toward another person in the same circumstances. There is also likely a specific creative or personal expression that has been trying to emerge across these same 3 attempts, something you have wanted to create, write, build, or express, that has been repeatedly set aside in favor of more immediately practical demands on your time and attention. The first time this creative impulse arose, perhaps you told yourself you would return to it once things settled down. The second time, perhaps a similar impulse arose again, met with the same postponement, the same promise of future attention that never quite arrived. The third time, perhaps the impulse arrived with a bit more insistence, a growing awareness that the settled-down moment you have been waiting for may not actually arrive on its own. Creative expression, even when it does not need to become a primary source of income or a major life change, often serves an important function in overall well-being, providing a sense of meaning and engagement that purely practical activities alone rarely provide. If there is a specific creative impulse that has surfaced repeatedly for you, this message is asking you to finally make even small, regular space for it, rather than continuing to postpone it indefinitely in favor of other demands that always seem to take priority. Now that all of this has been named clearly, consider what it means that these truths needed to return 3 separate times before finally reaching you with enough force to actually break through your usual patterns of dismissal. This does not mean you are careless or unaware. It simply means the patterns of avoidance you have developed over years are strong enough that gentle, single attempts were not sufficient to overcome them. Recognizing this honestly, without excessive self-criticism, is an important part of finally beginning to address these patterns directly. Choose one truth from everything named today, the one that struck you most sharply, the one that felt most uncomfortably familiar as you read it. That is the one asking for your attention first, above all the others mentioned here. Sit with it honestly, without immediately rushing toward a complete solution. Simply acknowledge, fully, that this particular pattern has repeated itself multiple times without adequate resolution, and that today, finally, it deserves genuine attention rather than continued postponement. Ask yourself, honestly, what has made this particular truth so easy to dismiss, repeatedly, across multiple occasions? Is it fear of what addressing it might require of you? Is it uncertainty about how to actually address it effectively? Is it simply habit, an ingrained pattern of avoidance that has become automatic through repetition? Understanding why this particular pattern has been so resistant to change can help you approach it differently this time, rather than falling into the same cycle of brief acknowledgement followed by continued avoidance. Consider, too, what the smallest possible step might look like, the one small action that would begin genuinely addressing this pattern rather than simply acknowledging it once again without any accompanying action. This step does not need to be dramatic or complete. It simply needs to be real, concrete, and different from the pattern of acknowledgement without action that has characterized your response to this particular truth across its previous 3 attempts to reach you. Think about why patience alone was clearly not sufficient to reach you, requiring instead this 4th, more direct attempt. Patience assumes that gentle reminders, given enough time, will eventually be received and acted upon. But some patterns of avoidance are strong enough that gentle reminders simply get absorbed into the pattern itself, dismissed along with everything else that challenges the comfortable status quo. When this happens repeatedly, a more direct approach becomes necessary, not out of anger, but out of genuine care for ensuring the message actually gets through before more time passes unnecessarily. Release any shame you might feel about needing 3 previous attempts before finally being ready to receive this message clearly. Shame does not accelerate readiness. It simply adds an additional layer of difficulty on top of patterns that are already challenging enough to address without additional self-punishment layered on top. Approach this 4th, more direct attempt with genuine self-compassion, understanding that the earlier versions of you who dismissed this message previously were doing the best they could with the awareness and courage available to them at those particular moments. Think about how differently your life might unfold from this point forward if you began responding to important inner signals the first time they arrive, rather than requiring multiple repeated attempts before finally taking action. This does not mean becoming hypervigilant, anxiously scanning every moment for hidden meaning. It simply means developing a genuine practice of pausing to consider significant inner signals seriously, rather than automatically dismissing them in favor of continuing with whatever felt more immediately comfortable or convenient in that moment. Consider setting aside regular time, even briefly, to check in honestly with yourself about which patterns in your life have been repeating without resolution. This kind of regular reflection can help you catch important signals earlier, before they need to repeat 3 or more times before finally being acknowledged seriously. Remember that responding to what this message has named today does not require transforming your entire life immediately or dramatically. It simply requires beginning, honestly, with whatever specific truth felt most significant to you, taking one small, concrete step toward finally addressing it rather than continuing the pattern of acknowledgement without action that has characterized your response to it so far. Think about the relief that typically follows finally addressing something that has been repeatedly avoided, compared to the ongoing, accumulating exhaustion of continuing to avoid it indefinitely. Avoidance often feels easier in each individual moment, but across repeated instances, it accumulates a hidden cost, a background tension that persists until the avoided matter is finally addressed directly, even if imperfectly at first. You are capable of finally addressing what this message has named today. You have faced difficult truths before in your life and found a way through them, even when the process was uncomfortable. This is simply another opportunity to practice that same capacity, this time with the added awareness that this particular truth has already tried reaching you 3 times before, making this 4th opportunity especially significant. Before this message reaches its true conclusion, take one final moment for yourself. Silently name, to yourself, the specific pattern that has felt most true and most repeated in your own life as you have read through everything shared today. You do not need to say it aloud. You simply need to stop pretending, even privately to yourself, that you have not already noticed this pattern multiple times before. That honest acknowledgement is where genuine change actually begins. The healing, the different decisions, the different chapter waiting on the other side of finally addressing what has been repeatedly avoided, all of it unfolds gradually from this single moment of honest recognition, if you allow it to continue forward from here rather than fading back into familiar avoidance once again. Consider why these particular truths needed to arrive 3 separate times before finally reaching you clearly. Sometimes readiness develops gradually, through repeated exposure to the same truth, each time landing a little more deeply than the time before, until finally, on this particular occasion, enough readiness has accumulated for genuine action to become possible. If this is your 4th encounter with some version of these truths, it does not mean you failed the previous 3 times. It simply means the necessary readiness had not yet fully developed, and now, perhaps, through the accumulated weight of these repeated attempts, it finally has. Think about how many other people receive similar messages only once, or perhaps twice, before either acting on them or losing the opportunity entirely as circumstances shift in ways that make the original guidance less relevant. You have been given 3 previous opportunities, and now a 4th, more direct one. This repeated persistence is itself worth acknowledging as significant, evidence that whatever these truths are pointing toward genuinely matters for your life, enough to warrant returning again and again until finally received. Do not allow this 4th attempt to become simply one more instance in an ongoing pattern of acknowledgement without action. Let this be the time the pattern actually breaks, not through dramatic, immediate transformation of your entire life, but through one small, genuine step taken today, in the direction of finally addressing what has been avoided across 3 previous opportunities to do so. Consider, too, that avoidance patterns, once broken even in one small area, often begin to loosen their grip more broadly across other areas of life as well. Breaking one small avoidance pattern builds a kind of confidence and self-trust that can then be applied to other areas where similar patterns have developed. You do not need to address everything named in this message simultaneously. Beginning with one area, genuinely and completely, can create momentum that eventually supports addressing the other areas as well, in their own appropriate timing. Think about the version of yourself that exists 1 year from today, having genuinely responded to what this message has named, rather than allowing it to become a fourth dismissed attempt in an ongoing pattern of avoidance. That version of you moves through life differently, having addressed the relationship pattern that was quietly costing more than it gave, having taken the health signals seriously before it escalated further, having finally pursued the dream that kept resurfacing despite years of postponement, having set the boundary that protects your energy and well-being more consistently than before. This version of you is available, but only if this fourth attempt at reaching you actually produces different results than the 3 attempts that came before it. The choice of which outcome unfolds from here rests entirely with you, beginning with whatever small, honest step you choose to take today, in response to whichever truth named in this message struck you most deeply. There is one more layer worth adding before this message reaches its true and final end, something practical to help ensure this fourth attempt actually produces different results than the 3 that came before it. Think about the specific moment, weeks or months from now, when you might find yourself slipping back into the old pattern of dismissal, forgetting the resolve you feel right now as you finish reading this message. This slippage is common, almost predictable, and preparing for it in advance can help you respond to it more effectively than simply hoping it will not happen at all. Consider writing down, somewhere you will actually see it again, whichever truth from this message struck you most deeply today. Not a lengthy explanation, simply a short reminder, specific enough that future you will immediately understand what it refers to. Place this reminder somewhere you will encounter regularly, a note on your phone, a piece of paper somewhere visible, anywhere that will bring the truth back into your awareness periodically, rather than allowing it to fade completely from memory the way the previous 3 attempts eventually did. Think, too, about identifying one specific person in your life who could serve as a source of accountability as you begin addressing whatever truth felt most significant to you today. This does not need to be a formal arrangement or require extensive explanation. It can be as simple as briefly mentioning to someone you trust that you are working on a particular change, creating a small amount of social accountability that can help sustain motivation during the inevitable moments when internal motivation alone begins to waver. Consider, as well, what specific obstacles are likely to arise as you begin addressing this truth, and think through, in advance, how you might respond to those obstacles when they appear. If the truth involves setting a boundary with someone, consider how that person might react, and how you might respond calmly regardless of their reaction. If the truth involves pursuing a long-postponed dream, consider what practical obstacles, time constraints, financial limitations, self-doubt, are likely to arise, and think through small ways you might address each obstacle as it appears, rather than being caught off guard by predictable difficulties. Remember that this message returning a 4th time does not guarantee it will not need to return again in the future if genuine action does not follow today. The most powerful thing you can do right now, more powerful than any amount of continued reading or reflection, is to take one small, concrete action within the next 24 hours, something specific and measurable that begins genuinely addressing whichever truth felt most significant to you today. This action does not need to be large. It simply needs to be real, different from the pattern of acknowledgement without action that has characterized your response to this particular truth across its previous 3 attempts to reach you. A single honest conversation begun. A single appointment scheduled. A single boundary stated clearly, even briefly. A single hour dedicated to the creative pursuit that has been postponed for too long. Choose one small, real action, and commit to taking it before this day ends, while the clarity and resolve you feel right now remains fresh and accessible. Think about how different your relationship with future guidance might become if this particular pattern, hearing important truths repeatedly without acting on them, finally breaks today. Each time you follow through on an important inner signal, you build increased trust in your own capacity to respond appropriately when significant guidance arrives, making future guidance easier to recognize and act upon, rather than requiring 3 or 4 repeated attempts before finally breaking through your habitual patterns of dismissal. This message reached you today for a 4th time, after 3 previous attempts that did not fully land. It may not return a 5th time in quite the same way. Take this opportunity seriously, not from fear of missing a final chance, but from genuine respect for your own growth and your own readiness to finally move forward differently than you have before. Carry this message with you beyond today. Return to it whenever old patterns of avoidance try to pull you backward into familiar dismissal. And when you are ready, not before, not because anyone forced you to, but when you are genuinely ready, take your next step. Deep down, you already know exactly what that step is. Thank you for receiving this message today, this time without letting it pass by unnoticed the way the previous 3 attempts did. Be gentle with yourself as you finally begin responding differently than before.